Hi everyone, this is the Cluster API provider AWS milestone planning meeting of August the 6th. We're pleased to be advised we're running under the CNCF Code of Conduct, so be cool to everyone. Use the raise hand feature if you'd like to speak. Make sure you put your name down if you want to in the meeting notes, which I've dropped in chat, and I will do so again for anyone else who's joined in the last minute or two. Okay, so I think the first thing we want to discuss is things that are related to the EKS support for EKS, I believe, is one of the reasons this call's been convened. So does anyone want to fill everyone in on where we are with that, what things are outstanding, potentially what other changes need to be done to the other bits of Cluster API, the provider to support EKS?
Pick me.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, so there are basically two major components to having fully functioning EKS support. The first is the control plane. So there's a control plane provider that is primarily being worked on by the folks at Weaveworks, and Richard is here. And then the other component is the EKS Bootstrap provider, which the New Relic folks have a PR open for, and we've kind of done one big cycle of review, and that's still open. On the control plane side, there are a couple of kind of interesting things that have come up because this is like the second control plane, so things start looking to get a little bit interfacey as this gets implemented. So there have been a couple of refactors to some of the scope shaped interfaces in Kappa, and those refactors continue a little bit. There's some kind of like a reordering of things for reconciling security groups, for example, because in EKS land, you get a new security group with your control plane. So reconciling security groups before reconciling the control plane is you can't do it completely. You have to do it again in order to get access to that. So that's just kind of an example of some of the reorganization that has come out of this work. The other major thing worth highlighting is the fact that CAPI proper needs to establish a client to the target cluster. And the way that that works in kubeadm is, kubeadm generates a fully valid kube config using certs all the way through. EKS doesn't want you to do that at all. They want you to use either the AWS CLI or the AWS IAM authenticator to establish a client to the cluster. So the only way EKS is giving you a kube config won't work in the CAPI container without giving it AWS credentials for one, and two, installing one of those two binaries. So there was a little bit of discussion about moving that to a service account token model in the short term, and question mark, question mark, question mark for the long term. The other thing that came up kind of related to this with bootstrapping is on the New Relic side, we were approaching AWS machine pools from an EKS context and not from a kubeadm context. The relevant difference being that refresh logic is not necessarily a thing that works all the way through in the kubeadm provider. So just kind of to call out, like, AWS machine pools, which we also have a PR for, will work with the EKS Bootstrap provider pretty well, but after 10 minutes, you won't be able to scale one made with the kubeadm provider. That might be a different topic on AWS machine pool, really, and not so much about EKS, but worth mentioning.
Yeah, okay. That sounds interesting, particularly the security one. If you want me to take a look at and see if there's anything we can reverse engineer, then I don't mind having a look as well. Richard, is there anything you'd want to add on this? Can't hear you.
Would help if I unmuted myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Andrew pretty much covered it all. I guess there's one other thing is there's a slight refactor around labels, the tags and the tags package. So that's gone for a couple of iterations to make it more useful and less EC2 specific, so that we can have essentially like a tags dot with EKS, and it does the EKS specific tagging. Yeah, and the security groups. So we currently look up the automatically created security group and attach it to the status of the control plane. But yeah, that's not enough. And I realized I hadn't actually updated the scope to return the security groups anyway. So that's an area of ongoing investigation. I guess the other thing that would impact this as well is the cluster AWS admin CLI and the required permissions. And we've got a good idea of the additional IAM permissions required and they're attached to the ticket, but to make this usable, obviously we need to get that change done as well. I think that's pretty much it. I'll put the parent tracking issue in the chat window as well, so that links off to all of the other sub issues about what we're implementing. I think we need to add a couple more to that Andrew raised earlier in the week.
Thanks for that. Okay. Sounds like we've got a good idea of what needs to be done and needs to plug away. So I think for the last bit, we just think about version numbers and what things are going into each release. But before we do that, I've dropped this spreadsheet link. So we've had a roadmap document in the repo. I'll share my screen this time. Find right. You can see this Google spreadsheet. Yeah, cool. I'll just yes. So we have a doc that I more or less emerged out of discussions in KubeCon San Diego, I think. So it's pretty informal discussion, and we've not really probably looked at it in a long time. So I just want to make sure that we go through this and we sort of agree with this, and maybe sort out priorities for these things. So one of the things thought about doing is if we sort of consider these in terms of like how desirable these are, and feasibility and visibility, maybe get a score out of them. So I think if we just take them one at a time, we can go through that. So first one being dual stack IPv4, IPv6 support. I'm not sure who's asked. I haven't seen many requests for this in the wild. One of the reasons to do this, however, is we don't have good testing for IPv6 in the Kubernetes project overall. And if we make cluster API one of the canonical testing ways for Kubernetes overall, and Kappa supports IPv6, we will get much better testing of IPv6 and Kubernetes in general. So there's not necessarily like, so in terms of visibility, so visibility end users might be 0 in terms it's not really visible, but it might be considered desirable from a Kubernetes space. I don't know how important this is to anyone else. Is this a thing that anyone else is seeing that they need? And my participants window is blank when I'm sharing my screen. So I guess at this point, don't raise your hand.
I can keep an eye on the hand raises
Right, okay.
as well, Nadir. The biggest request that I've seen for this has come from the release and testing team. That's the most work I've seen towards it. But I agree with you. I don't necessarily see a lot of demand or questions about when we're going to support it.
So I don't know, maybe if we're giving these scores out of 3, a 2, I think it's fairly feasible, but I don't think it's very visible. And maybe we just add these up. Next one is multi-tenancy. So we already have a PR that's open from New Relic. I think it's not from New Relic, Capital One, sorry. Feasibility is, and it is fairly, is reasonably visible. I mean, this is a no-brainer that we should just go ahead and get this to completion, unless there's any objections. No. Network topology. So this is one that I've opened up, and it's really about, we get a lot of requests to make changes to networking, and in my opinion, I'm really scared of it, actually. It's we have a lot of conditionality in the controller now. We've had discussions with AWS as well. That Jay popped up in the call about possibly using the AWS controllers for Kubernetes. So what we would do in this is break up that AWS cluster object and allow you to construct the various components, and then that can account for all weird and wonderful varieties of networking in the AWS context, the infinite permutations thereof. So there's a question here around when that other project comes online, whether it supports the multi-tenancy that we do, or do we go ahead and do it anyway? How much do we implement sort of the ad hoc requests that come in? So that's, I think, some of the things that we need to weigh up. Has anyone got thoughts on that? Andrew?
Yeah, so I think this is a desirable. I am scared, as you mentioned, of like our implementation of like doing this in the Kappa controller and things like that. So like I do think that the feasibility of this would change given whether or not we use the ACK controllers. Yeah, that's just my opinion. That like I think this is a great idea given ACK. I think it is a scary idea not given ACK. Oops.
Andrew, did you raise your hand again, or is my Zoom on the blank?
I did. I remembered to put it down, and then I just raised it again, thinking I was putting it down.
Anyone else? No. Okay. So I think we will. It's desirable, but feasibility is low. It's going to be very visible if we do it. Machine pools. I think we're doing this right now, so it's going to be in regardless. Andrew.
So I wonder if we should kind of define how far into machine pools, because with EKS support, there are a couple of ways to approach a machine pool from the ASG like unmanaged side. There's also like the managed. There might be a couple machine pool providers in Kappa, depending on, or maybe they're not in Kappa code base, but you know, it's worth calling out that there is a managed node group idea that may or may not be in scope for the Milestone.
And by managed, do you mean in the service of EKS?
That's right. So EKS has like an API for give me managed node group, please. And it's like an ASG, but hidden behind the scenes from you and very specific to EKS. And there was also a thought about Fargate profiles with respect to that I think like may work in a machine pool context, but I'm not sure.
Okay, so I just added managed machine pool, so EKS managed machine pool for EKS, but unmanaged machine pool KubeADM and machine pool Fargate. So is the one that in progress right now this sort of EKS, but unmanaged, as in it's an ASG that works with EKS?
It's 7 and 8. It's both of them. Okay. It's the one that relies on a Bootstrap Bootstrap object. So it works for either EKS or KubeADM.
Okay. And how desirable do you think is the managed EKS, Richard?
I guess from people that use like EKS Cuttle to provision EKS, the managed nodes is quite popular at the moment from our customers. You know, they don't want to look after the actual nodes, so it would be quite desirable to quite a few of our customers. That and the unmanaged. We don't see much with the Fargate side of things with EKS Cuttle.
Cool. And how is it? Do you think it's the managed one is easy to replicate? It fits, as in it fits with the machine pool API design, and or will it be something that's wildly different and require more work?
I don't think it would be wildly different, to be honest, because there's still instances they're just managed, and a few other bits around it, different API calls, but.
Cool, thanks. And Andrew, how important is Fargate to you?
It's not. It's just it is a. Once you get into EKS land, there are kind of 3 ways to bring nodes in, and one of them is managed, one of them's unmanaged, one of them's Fargate. So I called it out just to be technical.
Yeah. All right, and I'm giving it a low feasibility in terms of like I don't know how Fargate would map onto a machine pool, to be honest. No idea what it would look like. Cool. Next one is the using ACK if it arrives. I think unless anyone objects, it's very desirable and probably incredibly feasible as well. Well, migration, I think, probably makes it go down. It'd be fairly visible if we do it.
So that one's a challenge because I'm not sure if it's actually something that's feasible for V1 Alpha 4 with the timing that we're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that feasibility. Just clarify that, what we think. This is one I put down, is performance improvements and rate limiting. I think New Relic's very keen on this. You were hitting into your CloudTrail limits. We've definitely seen it in our own scale testing. Unless anyone's got objections, I think we we need to just go ahead and do this. I guess might be maybe the desirability goes down if you're using EKS and everything's managed by EKS, but it's like if you're not, it's pretty important. I'll be starting work on that soon anyway. Andrew.
So where it gets a little bit more spicy is like if you use the VPC CNI, which is a thing that just makes a bunch of calls, and Kappa's also making a bunch of calls, you can get into a scenario where like Kappa's volume in a self-managed cluster of AWS calls will actually slow down your pod's abilities to get IPs. And that's true EKS or not.
We'll just, I think that is pretty high priority then. Spot instance support. Don't know how much demand there is on this. People who are working with customers probably know a bit more. Any ideas? Andrew?
Hi, me again. So there is a degree of this that comes with the unmanaged node group support. The struct that we've created does have the, I forget the name of the fields, the instance distribution fields that allow you to say, like, I would like to use a spot pool for some portion of my ASG. So that is in there. What is not in there is saying I would like an individual machine object to be provisioned via like a spot pool or something like that. So there may still be some desirable, like to have a machine deployment, for example, that is backed by a spot fleet sounds odd, but maybe there's maybe there's use case for that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think you're more likely to do it for the machine pool personally. So, I'll put that via machine pool then. I think we get it. Don't know how desirable it is, but it looks like it's happening. GPU support, elastic GPU. Again, I have no idea. Like, do people want this? It seems it's either there's two things we need to consider here. The support in image builder, particularly with NVIDIA drivers, and the licensing stuff will be interesting around that anyway. And whatever we support in API, I think we get GPU support automatically through the instance type, but we don't support the elastic GPU settings right now.
I think there's one other component of this too, and that's being able to expose the GPU resources to the autoscaler as well. And that's going to probably tie into core cluster API so that we can bubble things up correctly.
It sounds like a lot of work. New Alex, Rich, do you see any desire for GPU access?
So it was requested for us for EKS Cuttle to support enabling GPUs, like in doing those install steps. We have a profile where you can enable it as well, and that was from direct customer requests. But they're not that many of them. Would be good though.
Yeah, so I see a lot of demand for getting just like an image that actually works. I think if anyone who's looked at the NVIDIA stuff, documentation is pretty geared towards Docker, not containerd, and it's pretty horrible. I'm going to say it probably is fairly feasible to add API. I don't know what the feasibility is for adding it to Autoscaler 2.
I haven't
Wow.
dug deep enough to really know, just because there's hints of GPU stuff, but I didn't dig in deep enough to see how it ties in. So I think one is about right.
Yeah, and I've no idea about the image. I think it might be pretty horrible for Containerd. So also it's might be difficult. Yeah, Windows support. That's another one. So I think this is mostly an image builder question, because I think you can pretty much run cloud in it at the moment, and then anything else. I know Azure is going to be working on a Bootstrap provider that does the things through, I don't know, whatever it is, PowerShell, design state configuration, sysp, the unattended stuff, I guess, is what they're doing.
On the plus side, EKS support gives us an easier road to support this through EKS machine pools if we go the managed machine pool route.
Okay, that's interesting. I have no idea on desirability. One, unless anyone's. EKS, I think we just had on the roadmap. I mean, we're doing it, so fun. Bootstrap failure detection. So I did start a doc on this a couple of months ago. We were trying to figure out whether or not there was some generic cluster API wide way to do this. I think the conclusion was not really. Given that we've done some hacks, I guess, in cluster API, mainly around retrying kubeadm, the need for necessity to have to do this should have gone down. But like how, I think probably for the New Relic people, because you've been bringing up clusters a lot, do you still see the need to, do we need to build something in around AWS Session Manager in particular? Andrew?
So there are kind of a couple different interesting things here. So on the machine deployment side, there is machine health checks actually get rid of most of our problems, in that, like, oh, there's no node, like, let's just keep retrying. And then, like, you know, I'll just notify myself in some way if I need to go start trying to shell onto a host and figure out what's going on. With machine pools, it's a little bit more interesting, because there is no machine object, and because the number of replicas is optional on a machine pool object, like, it's really hard to sometimes detect that you're not in the state that you think you're in. So there's like, it gets a lot more complicated in the machine pool case, I think. But it would be nice on the machine deployment side to know, like, you know, hey, max retries 3, you really need to go look at this because we tried to replace this machine 3 times and we couldn't. So like something like that could avoid the session manager, but give more information than we get today, perhaps.
Okay. Maybe 2. I've no idea around feasibility. Need to look at it again. So 2. Don't know. All right. Thanks for that. I haven't even considered machine pools at all, so that would be even completely different once again. So that's good feedback. I'll start having a look again what to do, if there's anything we can do. Next one is machine load balancers. So I'm not sure why this is in the AWS roadmap per se. I think this came out of stuff that was happening, particularly with the on-premise environments, where there isn't necessarily a public cloud load balancer construct, and you need one for your API server, regardless of whatever ingress or service type load balancer you actually have in the cluster. Is there a reason not to use ELBs and have a machine-based API server load balancer in the AWS world? I'm not sure.
So I think this would tie in more if we do agree to go with the load balancer provider and core cluster API. I think we could leverage kind of, you know, this concept, and it would also give us the ability to support more than just ELB classic. So it would give us a way to potentially swap in an NLB, or if folks wanted to spin up kind of a separate load balancer for ingress services, there would be a facility to do that as well, using the same type of tooling that would manage kind of a control plane load balancer.
Okay. So would it have to be something that's done in cluster API first, and then we would do an implementation thereof?
I think so.
If anyone objects to those numbers, you should be all be able to edit this, by the way. It's on it's shared to the same SIG cluster lifecycle main list. I think, and finally from those roadmap items, it's to use Eventbridge for instance notifications. So things like when the machine turns off stuff, Kappa can get notified automatically through some mixture of SNS topics, SQS, queues. In my mind, that's probably fairly desirable, rather than waiting for a reconciliation loop again. There's some.
It could also, I was just going to say, it could also tie into the scalability, the performance improvements, and rate limiting as well.
Yeah, I think it's fairly visible. I think people will get immediate benefit from getting accurate information from KGET machines. So yeah, I think we should just do it. Okay, let's see if we sum these up. Still got quite a lot of lines, but I think our big ticket items are therefore doing a multi-tenancy. Delete that because we wrote that up into the different. The managed machine pools, or the varieties thereof, not so much the Fargate version. Getting those performance improvements, rate limiting done, EKS in general, just getting the support for that. The CloudWatch Eventbridge notifications, those are our highest priority items then, I think, for our next release. And then slightly less than that, AWS controls Kubernetes if it arrives, network topology if dependent on that ACK, and I guess if there's time, we can do GPU support and dual stack and Bootstrap failure detection. Does that make sense to everyone? Is there anything that's major top things, items that people think are missing or they would like to see? Nope. Okay, cool. Okay, so how much time? So got, it's about 20 minutes left on this. Yeah, so what I've done is this projects 9. So it's on the Kubernetes SIGs. We can create projects within the SIGs organization. We can't necessarily create a project on the project itself. So what I've just been doing is bucketing all of the open issues, of which I think there was about 94, into various categories, and then we go through. Maybe, not sure now is best time to go through all of these, or if maybe we should just sort of figure out our timelines first. Which anyone got opinions on which order we should we sort out the timelines first, the milestones?
Yeah, I think that would be good. It'll be hard to bucket things without knowing what timeline we're shooting for. Okay,
cool. So if we look back at this on, right, let's see if we can. Oh, I'm not going to do that. That's too annoying. I will just bold it. I'll just make these red. Right. So if we think about these, all of these things, none of these appear to me to require breaking API changes, right? So because most, especially with EKS, these are all separate APIs. Therefore, I think probably our next 0.6 release is going to stay on V1 Alpha 3, just with a whole bunch of new features. Any opinions on? Jason, can you remember what our timelines are for cluster API next versions? Maybe we can align on that.
Shoot, not off the top of my head, but I'll see if I can dig them up from the project.
Oops. We could go 6 months, not 6 months, 3 months from September. So it's October, well, December, I guess, for 0.60. Is that optimistic, or not enough things in there? And can we release it sooner? How do people feel on that? Andrew.
Yeah, so from the New Relic perspective, like it would be like optimal to be able to deploy the EKS objects via published YAML, whether it's an alpha release or whatever, like at the end of August, for example. As far as getting the machine pool portion, like that's totally like later. I certainly wouldn't see that work going as far as December. Like in our case, we'd probably like to have them in the mid-October timeframe, maybe even early October. And I'm guessing based on calendars I saw a while ago. Yeah, so like from our perspective, like we're basically committed to making EKS fully functioning in its basic form by the end of this month, and having machine pools functioning for EKS by the end of the next month. So like that's our position, I guess.
Okay, maybe on that basis, maybe we make these 060 all singing, dancing, initial EKS support, and then machine pools in 06x, well, 06, whatever that is, 061 probably for end of September. So end of August, 060 EKS initial, machine pool 061 end of September. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, and personally, I will be doing performance improvements stuff, things like that, for probably the 060 timeline as well. Probably follow up with the Eventbridge. Probably follow up with the multi-tenancy stuff. So yeah, I'll put Eventbridge and performance improvements 060, and then multi-tenancy for 061 and with the machine pools as well. Does that sound about right?
Yep, sounds good.
Cool. I'm okay with not immediately picking times with 15 minutes for the rest of these, and we can maybe people can give a thought about these, and we can come back to these in the next meeting. I think we've got a very clear idea what we want to get done in the next 2 months, and we can take the next meeting when there's more people around, wider variety of opinions to go through some of these other items that we know less around the desirability thereof, around GPUs, Bootstrap failure detection, spot instances, etc. Jason?
I was just going to say, I threw some rough dates for CAPI into the chat. It looks like there's a target for 2 more 0.3.x releases for August 31st and October 1st. And then there's not really too much of a target for V1 Alpha 4 yet, but looking maybe, Q4, Q1, calendar year wise. I think that'll probably become a little bit more clear as we get further along with the CAPI planning.
All right then. I think maybe on that basis, I'm happy to call it for this current bit, and then we can sort of give some thought to it, align, see what happens with CAPI, Women Alpha 4 planning, and revisit the rest of this. I think we're good to go for the next 2 months otherwise. Cool. All right then. With that, thanks everyone for their time. See you in the next regular meeting, I guess. I will get this recording saved and sort out with Jason how do I get it to somewhere.
Yeah, I'll be happy to help you out with it. Thanks everybody. Thanks, Nadir.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.